Lovely to have Wendy with us in studio today, and with winter looming, a good time to talk about the potential for major storms and the kind of damage that they can cause. Today, Wendy wants to share some advice on how to avoid having your insurance claims for storm damage declined. We've got a very awful, I feel terrible reading this poor person's story about what happened to them, but it's such a good learning tool for the rest of us. And we might have some space for open line calls towards the end of the hour. So if you'd like to raise a different issue, you're welcome to send a WhatsApp to 072 567 1567. And of course, you're always welcome to call in on 021 446 0567. Great to have you back with us, Wendy.
Thank you, Pippa. Good to be here.
Doing some wrestling with headphones in the background there. Wendy, storm-related insurance claims obviously tend to spike during the Cape winter, but you shared some pretty surprising data. Well, certainly it was surprising to me, the kind of figures that you shared about how often such claims are actually repudiated.
Indeed. I wasn't sure of the exact number until I started doing a bit of research for today's case, because my opinion's skewed, because I only hear from the ones that
get rejected.
And there's quite a few of them, I must say. It's a steady stream into my inbox. But 25%, according to the 2023 Ombudsman for Short-Term Insurance report, that Ombuds office is now part of the NFO, the National Financial Ombuds Scheme. But in their report of 2023, that would have covered the year 2022, 25% of homeowners' storm damage claims were rejected by insurers for reasons of, they say this damage was not caused mainly. Obviously, the storm event was
a factor,
but the argument is that the storm wouldn't have caused this damage were it not for the fact that the wall or the roof is not built according to building regulation standards, or there was a gradual deterioration due to lack of maintenance. And so had these structures, roof, been appropriately maintained, and had they been erected compliant with the regulations in the first place, the damage might not have been caused by that storm. So that's very entrenched sort of legal precedence in this area. And if the insurer can prove it, and trust me, they spend money on engineers' reports, etc., when it's a large claim, and they come with all these reasons, and we'll get into it a bit later. But unless you as the homeowner can disprove what their expert is saying, the ombudsman will side with the insurer.
Okay, and obviously this can be a huge cost to the claimant. And I just felt sick when I read the case that came in yesterday from Palesa, Wendy. It's a Joburg case, and it relates to, there was a huge cloudburst in Joburg back in March. Tell us what happened.
Yes, actually I had done some research in my own inbox and what has been reported on other case studies. Yeah. But this came in just yesterday, and I thought I have to share this, even though it's not a Joburg case, because, this storm happened on the 5th of March, that it's tail end of their storm period, and we're about to go into ours. So Palesa, she and her husband bought a house in Roodepoort. They have 3 children. They bought this house in June of last year. Actually, it took ages to get registered, but it was finally registered into their name. Transfer went through on the 4th of March. Right. They had, in the meantime, insured the house with the, because you take out a bond and then you have to have homeowners insurers. The insurance wasn't, I'm not going to name the insurer because I'm still awaiting their response to a few questions that I have, but it wasn't linked to their bank. The very next day, so the house is registered in their name on the 4th. On the 5th, obviously they hadn't moved in yet, there was a cloud burst over Roodepoort with more than 100 millimeters of rain falling in less than an hour. Vox Weather reported on it, saying that cloud bursts are very hard to forecast because they are hyper-localized, fast-developing, and intense.
Having lived in Joburg for 10 years, I've experienced them. I can very easily picture that. I mean, it's an intensely hard downpour of a massive amount of water falling with great strength in a very short space of time. So the kind of experience that you just have to pull your car over to the side of the road and wait it out because you can't see in front of you. I hardly dare to ask, Wendy, what happened to Palesa's home?
Okay, so I've read all the engineers' reports and everything in details, looked at the diagram. So first, a section of the wall at the back of their house, sort of not on the road, there was some empty ground behind them.
Okay.
That collapsed, allowing water to flood in. That surge of water then demolished all the other boundary walls.
Oy.
So if you look at a picture of the house now, there's no perimeter walls.
Yes.
Water then rushed into the house up to 1 meter high in some of the rooms. When they tried to claim for the damages, their insurer rejected their claim on the grounds that the walls were not built, particularly that back one, not built according to building regulations. The engineer that they appointed concluded that the failed portion of the wall was constructed with cement block bricks, with a small portion and the remaining wall being clay bricks. Based on the difference in brick type, the engineer said it's reasonable to conclude that the same portion of the wall had failed previously. The wall was also noted to be in a deteriorated condition with deteriorated mortar joints. According to the engineer, the wall would have been in a weak condition as a result of accelerated wear and tear, deterioration from poor construction. The extent of the damage would have been mitigated had the walls been constructed according to building regulations and adequate drainage provided.
So there wasn't proper drainage for water building up
It
behind
built
it
up
to
on the outside of the wall and then broke
the whole thing over.
and that section that had been rebuilt at some stage.
Okay, so poorly constructed in the first place without proper drainage, and the secondly clearly having been repaired, and it looks like patched up with different materials. Okay, obviously absolutely ghastly news to receive. Wendy, how much is Palesa out of pocket for the damage?
Well, because the claim was rejected, the insurer didn't provide a quote, so it would have been for the rebuilding of the exterior walls and obviously for some remedial repairing inside the house. I mean, water goes up to this high, there's going to be flooring and wall issues and whatever. There was no furniture in the house because they hadn't moved in, thankfully. So, but they have, because now they're looking at, we haven't moved in yet. They're living with her sister-in-law in Midrand. Can you imagine? And they've got a quote for building materials to rebuild the walls only. And that is 110,000 Rand. So no labor and nothing inside.
Just the materials, 110.
Yeah.
Okay. So the claim rejected, and Palesa then lodged a complaint with the National Financial Ombuds scheme, but it didn't go her way.
No. Just yesterday, the scheme let Palesa know that it had sided with the insurer. And here's the very important bit, because a lot of people respond like this when it happens to them. She and her husband argued that the insurer should have inspected the property prior to issuing the policy and that she could not have known of the defective workmanship. But that's not what happens. The industry does underwriting at claim stage, right?
Okay.
With these homeowners insurance claims. So they're not going to come out and check anything. They're not going to require you to submit any certifications or recent maintenance or anything like that. But when there's a big claim, they will then spend the money on an engineer's report
somebody else,
and the like. And in this case, they found that there was defective workmanship, etc., and lack of maintenance. The Ombud said these contentions, in other words, what Palesa and her husband said, that
the insurer should have checked.
Do not shift the burden of proof. It is the insured's responsibility, not the insurer's, to ensure that the property complies with regulations. And this part, as the insured is best placed to know its condition.
Now, that's a big burden to place on the shoulders of a layperson, Wendy, because I hear what they're saying. You, the person taking ownership of the property, you should be aware of its condition before you make an offer to purchase. If you're living in the home, you would be aware of maintenance issues, etc. But, I mean, I have to feel for Palesa. I'm a layperson. I don't know the first thing about structural engineering. I wouldn't be able to tell by looking at a wall whether it had been built to regulations or not, or how
rebuilt
stable it was.
So I asked Palesa about that. I said, do you know if there'd been, because one of the things the engineer said, the way the house is situated and the way the water funnels from all directions behind the house towards the house, there must have been some previous damage. And she said she did ask. She wasn't sure when the house was built, but she said the previous owner, the person they bought from, had lived there for 28 years and had said there'd been no incident. Now, maybe that happened more than 28 years ago. We don't know, but this is the problem. the Ombud continued, the insurer relies on this information in good faith and can't be held liable for defects. On a balance of probabilities, the damage was not caused solely by an insured peril, that's insurance speak for the storm, but rather by stormwater interacting with substandard construction. The complainant bears the onus to show that the damage falls within the policy coverage and has not this complainant, Palesa, has not provided contrary expert evidence to dispute the participants, that's the insurer's findings. The insurer, in turn, has discharged its onus by providing detailed expert analysis supported by photographic and regulatory evidence linking the damage to defective construction rather than to the storm alone. In order to reverse this recommendation, the complainant must provide facts to disprove, contradict, or disagree with the evidence provided by the insurer. So you've got a very much David and Goliath situation there. You've got the insurer with very big pockets and a lot to lose. I mean, if just the construction materials for just the walls was over 100,000, this is a big claim. So I think it's a lot for the rest of us to learn out of this,
from this experience,
as we go into our stormy season here in the Cape.
Now let's bring in an expert of our own at this point, and I'll be interested. I mean, so they've left the door open there for Palesa to appoint her own expert to come and assess and try and reach a different conclusion. But obviously, if you trust the engineer who's already looked at the property and their opinion, they've found differently.
Well,
so
the engineer is appointed by the insurer.
So there is some vested interest.
But there's something that we should be doing before we need to claim, before we buy the property.
Okay, so let's
and that's where we're going now.
Let's bring in our guest here. We have with us on the line John Graham, who is the executive chairman of House Check, and they are one of the country's leading property inspection companies based in Claremont. And John, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Welcome to the show.
Afternoon, Wendy, and thank you so much for having me.
John, Pippa here, just to repeat what the National Financial Ombud Scheme said, it's the insured's responsibility, not the insurer, to ensure that a property complies with regulations because they're in the best position to know the condition. I mean, if they were talking about you, who's an expert in property inspection, I would say absolutely. If they were talking about me as a layperson, I'm absolutely clueless on these matters. It's a tough situation that the homeowner then finds themselves in.
It certainly is a tough situation, and South African homeowners cover is very different from all other types of insurance cover offered in South Africa. For instance, if you want life insurance, the life insurance company will normally send you for a medical. To make sure that you've got no pre-existing conditions, your heart is okay, etc., your blood pressure. So the old Mutual or Sanlam or whoever is insuring you knows what your health is like and what your statistical life expectancy would be. Mm-hmm. Same if you're insuring your car. If it's a brand new car, they will insure it without an inspection. But if you're buying a second-hand or insuring a second-hand car, the insurance company will normally ask you to go for an inspection at one of the designated agents just to make sure the windscreen isn't cracked, etc., etc. But most homeowners insurance is done without any underwriting at all until claim stage, which is very unfair, but it's a fact of life. It's very unfair on the homeowner because, first of all, homeowners are, if you have a mortgage bond, you're required to have insurance. And the bank or any other insurance company will insure your property, but they will only send an insurance assessor out at claim stage.
As in this
and the only way around that is to document the condition of your property, so that you've got photographs and you've got expert documentation. And that's what we do. House Check advises that people buying a house should first of all get it inspected before they as a suspensive condition of their offer to purchase.
Yes.
And we also advise that people who've owned houses for many years should have a regular maintenance inspection, just to check that all the areas that they can't see, which are the high-risk areas like the roof, that the gutters aren't blocked, that the roof sheeting hasn't come loose, that tiles and slates aren't dislodged, that the roof capping is still okay.
Yes.
And that's the sort of thing, it'll cost you a couple of $1,000, but if you did that once every 2 years, first of all, you would be able to maintain your house in a tip-top condition. And most South Africans sadly don't maintain their most expensive investment, which is their property. And secondly, if you did have a catastrophic event like a storm, and the insurance company came to look and said it wasn't caused by the peril of the storm, you'd be able to produce a house check report or any other home inspector's report that's credible and say, well, we had it inspected 6 months ago and this was the condition of the home.
Okay, so that is my point of doing this show. Is never let an insurer, should a bad thing happen to your home, should a storm really cause a lot of damage, don't let the insurer point the finger at you and say lack of maintenance. It wasn't the storm, it was lack of maintenance. And that's certainly something I've learned from this job and I apply in my own life. It's not an exciting thing to spend money on, but it can save you a lot of heartache and a lot of money.
Yeah, one of the tough things, Pippa, also is a question of compliance.
Yeah.
Because the insurance assessors more and more repudiate claims on the basis of non-compliance. So, for instance, that garden wall that the person up in Gauteng that collapsed.
Yeah.
Any garden wall, what they call a freestanding wall, which is higher than 2 meters, must be designed by an engineer. They call it rational design by a competent person, and the plans for that wall must be approved by the local municipality. But lots and lots of freestanding walls in Cape Town and elsewhere aren't approved. They're non-compliant walls. They built without expansion joints. They're built with a mix of materials or poor mortar or not adequate foundations. And the insurance company will then come and look and say, first of all, is this a compliant wall? Is it on the plan approval? Did an engineer, was he involved in it? They'll do the same with the roof. They will look at the pitch of your roof, because every roof covering has different minimum pitches, be they tiles or roof sheeting or thatch or anything else. And the insurance assessor is trained, and we actually have a training company, and we train assessors in terms of what they call SANS 10400, which is the standards for the implementation of the National Building Regulations.
Yes, I saw that in the engineer's report. I saw reference to that.
Yeah, and the insurance assessor will say, well, the roof was not compliant. Now, National Building Regulations are there to ensure that houses are well built, but many people cut corners. And, of course, many houses were built prior to the National Building Regulations coming into effect, which was about 1985.
Also,
so
another issue.
Houses
sorry, John.
Yeah.
Another issue, just before we go to news, is that I've picked up in some of the complaints I've had is where the wall was originally built at a much lower height and the foundations relative to that height, and then for security reasons, people have now added on, done their own sort of, no plans, no nothing, and then when it falls over, the insurer says absolutely not. The foundations aren't deep enough to support this height. Yeah. Do you find that an issue here in the Cape much? It certainly was an issue in KZN.
Yes, it is, but probably the bigger issue is the lack of weep holes or drainage holes.
I see.
Okay. Because water has tremendous power, and that's something that any homeowner or a reputable insurance or property inspector would be able to point out. We train all our inspectors to ask one fundamental question: where will the water go when it rains?
Yes.
Yeah.
The water that falls on the roof, how will it get safely to the ground? How will it move away from the structures? And how will it be managed so it doesn't cause damage?
A message on the WhatsApp line from JD saying, years ago, the Dip River flooded due to storm and debris in it, and it washed away the ground behind our back wall, which then collapsed with water flooding into the backyard. It ruined the pool and surrounds. Insurance refused to pay out, claiming land subsidence.
Yeah.
I'm really sorry that you had that
That's
experience,
common
JD.
with pools.
Yeah.
Common with pools. They say that I've got a Durban case, where they say they'll replace the pool, but the pool was in a bank which subsided, and these insurance policies don't cover subsidence, most of them. So she said, well, without restoring the bank, what use is the pool?
Yeah.
So it's a tricky one, and
Okay.
it's quite common with pools.
We are just going to wrap up our conversation before we let him go with John Graham, the Executive Chairman of House Check. And before the break, he was talking to us about the importance of getting a proper home inspection done as part of before you sign on the dotted line and commit to the purchase or making it a suspensive condition of your offer to purchase. And then also the benefit of doing regular just checks of your home for these kinds of issues so that you are alerted to them and able to intervene and fix them before you hit the condition places in.
You actually want them to act like an insurance assessor, looking for things, for reasons not to pay you out, like the way your wall's constructed.
So let's bring John back in. John, I'm interested to hear from you. What are some of the most common issues that those inspections find that people need to be alert to?
Pippa, probably the most common is the failure of a geyser within the roof space. For some peculiar reason, South Africans put their geysers, their hot water pressure geysers, in the roof space and then forget all about them until they burst.
Yeah.
And many geysers, according to South African insurance companies and also house check inspectors, are not installed compliantly. There's no drip tray, or the temperature and pressure relief valve is blocked off, or the vacuum breakers are incorrectly installed. There are about 32 check items that we ask our inspectors to do in a geyser. So probably the geyser non-compliance is the biggest risk area. But right up there is also the roof, because the roof is a high-risk area, but even if it is totally compliant and well-constructed, it still needs regular maintenance. And as I said earlier, South Africans are very, very bad at maintaining their homes. They maintain their cars, they maintain their health, but they normally don't do anything about their house until it breaks. And they don't get up on the roof. They don't know the gutters are blocked. They don't know some of the tiles have been dislodged in last winter's storm. And the water in the ridge capping is perhaps cracked. Lots of people have flat roofs with bitumen torch-on waterproofing, which needs regular protection from the ultraviolet sun, and that's often not done. So it really is good practice, if you've invested millions in a home, is to ask someone who's willing to climb on a ladder and who knows what to look for to produce a report for you. Cost you $3,000, maybe $4,000. It will effectively give you a job schedule so that you can schedule planned maintenance rather than preventative maintenance, and make sure that you don't have a disaster. But it will also give you a document that you can prove if there is a major storm, to show to the insurance company this was the pre-existing condition.
Okay.
I've been a responsible homeowner.
Yes.
Yeah. John, can I play devil's advocate here? What if one of your inspectors misses something? Where would the indemnity sit if somebody has had a home done, a check done by House Check or another inspection service, and your inspector, say, failed to pick up on a compliance issue or a structural issue, which then did subsequently lead to damage and repudiated claim? Would you bear any liability in those circumstances?
Yes, we would, if it was serious. House Check is probably one of the few inspection companies, maybe the only one, that carries both public liability and professional indemnity cover for its inspectors, basically to cover human error.
Okay,
Right.
so you have that cover. That's good. That's good to know. As a matter of interest, have you ever had to call on it, John?
In 15 years, we've had one claim where an inspector missed something in the roof cavity in terms of a incorrectly placed roof truss, and it was picked up later, and our insurance company paid. And we had quite a heavy excess. I think it was about 20,000 Rand. And we asked the inspector to pay half of the excess. And 15 years, only one claim, I think. And we've done, in that period, probably 6,000 or 7,000 inspections. So we're quite proud of our record. We only use trained inspectors who are trained by CEHITA, who are members of NABISA, National Association of Building Inspectors of South Africa. And all of our inspection reports are also quality controlled by a second pair of eyes before they're sent out to the client.
Okay.
And we have systems, we can do all that within 24 hours.
Okay.
So our inspectors go out with a smartphone and a lot of knowledge in their head, and are able to document visually and in text the complete condition of a house within a couple of hours and give you a report.
Excellent. So that's a very valuable piece of paper to be had either when you're considering putting in an offer on a home, so that you're armed with real knowledge about what might be lurking beneath that lovely exterior, as well as pre-storm weather in particular, where you want to safeguard yourself against a claim being rejected. How many people, I don't know, let's talk about the potential buyers. What percentage in the Cape, because I know it's a bit higher than elsewhere in the country because we've got a lot of very expensive real estate here. What percentage of potential home buyers, on your reckoning and your experience, based on house sale figures, actually do go to the trouble, or not so much trouble, but the fairly limited, small expense of getting this inspection done by yourselves or others?
But they're probably at the top end of the market. If we're talking 15, 20 million and higher, probably 30 or 40% of those buyers, who are often overseas buyers, will spend money on a professional home inspection. At the bottom end of the market, probably not 1% of people, and they're obviously the most vulnerable as well.
Yes. Without the means to pay for the big damages on their own
and to survive a rejected claim.
Yeah.
John, thank you so much. It's been really interesting chatting to you, and really helpful advice on the value of doing it properly and preventing a disaster down the line by falling short on your maintenance, etc. We really appreciate your time this afternoon.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, Pippa. Thank you, Wendy. Lovely to chat to you.
Thanks for your time. John Graham, Executive Chairman of HouseCheck. We're going to take a very short break and then back with a couple of comments and responses to that interview, as well as some open line calls. A couple of people commenting, and we've got some voice notes that have come in as well. So perhaps let's start with the voice notes and then we'll get to the text WhatsApps.
Hey there. I'm wanting to find out, with the specific case that you guys are talking about with the home insurance, considering it happened on the very next day once the transfer happened, is there not a regulation around the fact that realty agents are supposed to hand over approved plans and occupancy certificates, meaning that if you have an occupancy certificate, that all the professionals and the municipality have signed off to say that your house is built to minimum national building regulations? Is this not a requirement, as I ask, in law for realty agents to do?
No.
You need certificates for beetle and electricity and certain specific issues, but not for the entirety of the property.
You need gas installation compliance certificates, Bora, or in case it is Bora, you want bug thing, and electrical installations. But that's it. What happens typically, or not typically, is what happens. You get there's a term, but it's basically a list, a form that the seller fills in, or the agent fills in for them, having consulted with them. Are you aware of any problems with, and then every aspect of the house? Damp is a big one, by the way. John refers to it as the cancer of South African homes.
Damp, really?
Damp, yeah. And then if the seller says, no, everything's fine, I'm not aware of anything, if a big problem comes to light, the damp starts becoming very visible within weeks of moving in, kind of thing, which happens. Now you've got a battle. The only way you can prove it is if, only way you've got a case is you can prove that they knew about it and withheld the information deliberately.
Okay.
You've got to prove they knew, and which is not easy. I had a case where the handyman who'd done the work provided the new owner with his invoice, which had 20 kilograms of polyfiller to cover up the damp shortly before the house went on the market.
Wow. So
the court found in her favor, but that's rare. And even if you do have that ammunition, you've got to have the appetite and the finances for legal action.
Yeah.
So no, there isn't, and there's nobody that's signing off. A lot of people, and thank you for the question, because there's something I didn't mention. In that case in Rudaport, I said that the bank and the insurer were two separate entities. In many cases, people will take out homeowners insurance because they obviously promote it to you. If you're going to Standard Bank or Nedbank, whatever, they want you to buy their homeowners insurance product. And what happens is, when you apply for the bond, they'll send someone round to inspect. And then when these claims are denied down the line, the homeowner will say, but they sent their... So say the Nedbank insurance will decline. That Nedbank sent their inspector. No, that person is not there to judge, because they're not even qualified to do it, to know the integrity or to assess the integrity of your boundary walls or your roof or anything else. They're there. It's a financial exercise. They're there to assess whether there's sufficient value in the home in the current market to warrant them extending you this loan. And so the Ombud has warned about this as well, because that's a very, very widely held misconception.
Okay, I'm
that
so
the
glad
house
you
has
mentioned
been somehow vetted by the person from the bank that came around, and it's absolutely nothing to do with that. It's about the bond and the value of the house.
Several people WhatsApping saying the PPRA form has to be supplied with every sale. It's a mandatory disclosure form.
That's what I'm talking about.
That agents have to
Yes,
provide.
and I've just said,
yes,
explain the shortcomings of that.
But it's yes, if they're not aware,
proving deliberate withholding of information is what's needed, and even then you've got a legal battle in your hand.
Okay, so it's
far
not
easier and simple to just go to one of these companies and pay for the full inspection, professional technical inspection of the house. And if something big emerges, you either negotiate a lower selling price or you walk swiftly
away from the deal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's another voice note in from somebody, I think, who's had an experience with storm damage and an insurer not wanting to pay. If we can just find that in the meantime. While we look for that voice note, a text one in. How is the contract not void if you're paying for insurance for a non-compliant structure? So going back to where we started, if your insurer says, well, we're not going to pay that claim because the wall wasn't built to spec within engineering standards, how is the contract not void?
You wouldn't have a whole contract. I'm just speaking my gut feel on this. I'm handling a lot of insurance cases. The house isn't just insured for one particular, for the wall or for the roof. You're insured for all sorts of things. Your swimming pool, pump, everything that wouldn't fall out if you had to turn your property, your imagination upside down.
And shake
so it's all the fixtures. If that house in Rudaport could have burnt down, and there would have been a payout, right? Because the quality of that the ability of that back wall to withstand a flood was irrelevant. Yes, no bearing. So it's not that there was no cover at all.
There was just no cover for that specific part of the house which was non-compliant. I hear you. Thank you.
At claim stage, yeah.
Let's take a listen to that second voice note.
Hi there, Pippa and Wendy. Mark here, living just outside Stellenbosch, listening to the program. I totally sympathise with Palesa. Have exactly the same issue, and this has been going on for years. It's an old building, in fact, Cape Dutch, and a wall that is named on the policy. And the wall, during a night in winter and a very big storm, did exactly the same. Water built up and it collapsed. And the insurer's assessor, first of all, I think they looked at the wrong wall. I'm not sure whether they came back to look at the right one, but I was asked to give my own expert opinion. So I got an independent surveyor, building surveyor or engineer, whatever, and I have a report categorically saying it was due to storm damage. And that report cost me £10,000 rands plus or thereabouts. And I have been fighting with the ombudsman and have had no luck, and again with the insurers, and it's been going on for years. The quote to rebuild is an awful lot of money, and the wall still stands there broken. And by two main points: one, it was named on the policy; two, that yes, there would have been an inspection because it's quite a complicated property; and three, that my independent engineer said it was storm damage. So I would love to hear Wendy's feedback, and if Palesa is going to take it forward and get her own engineer, then beware, because I'm still having a big fight on this. And my broker is helping, but we are still not getting anywhere.
I would like to know how the ombuds responded, because I read from their deliberation on Palesa's case where they said, the insured needs to counter what, if they want to refute what the insurer is saying, they need to come with the evidence and their own evidence. So on what basis then would the ombud then not re-look at their finding? It's what the whole issue of the insurance term is proximate cause. So yes, there was the storm and then the structure, but it's whether the badly constructed or poorly maintained wall was the main cause of the damage or whether it was the storm. So if it's a huge, and that's why I've gone to the insurer to say, I went down a rabbit hole about that event. It was in the news, and it was an extraordinary amount of water. So we're talking about a really intense storm. So at what point does it become the case of, now, that could have been, built to spec, beyond spec, and with the water building up on the outside because of the sheer volume, it would sort of collapse. So you need to, it's the proximate cause, which is the main cause. So in a case like that with our listener, I would, it's welcome to email me, because that's what I would do. I would go straight to the Umbud and say, what was your thinking here? Why did the insured's expensively procured report on the event and on the wall itself, why has that been disregarded?
Yeah, because as you say, if it's from a legitimate expert,
so who's to say which expert is right
to repudiate it? Yes. Okay, Mark, if you'd like to, you're welcome to send some details through to Wendy. Just send an email to consumer@knowler.co.za, KNOWLER, consumer@knowler.co.za. Please put in the subject line CapeTalk storm insurance.
Yes.
Okay, and Wendy will keep an eye out for it and just give her a couple of the basic details of dates of the claim, etc., who you've dealt with, and perhaps she can pick up on that for you. Pauline writes in to say, I've just recently sold my house in Joburg, and I was told that approved plans may be requested by the bank on inspection for bond approval. This is not currently a mandatory requirement, but two of my estate agents said it is going to be legislated. The plans were not requested, even though I did have them. I was also told that homeowners must keep a set of approved plans themselves, as plans have been known to be lost in the archives. That's good advice. So keep a set of your own in a safe place.
I'm surprised that that's not routinely requested. That with a house that's, say, 30, 40 years old or however old, wouldn't you want to see the original plans? That also then you know exactly when it's built and all the rest. I think we should normalize
asking to see those.
Yeah, it's also a red flag if they can't provide them or whatever, because you need to know, if that stop, was it on the original plans? Are you now non-compliant because it was built?
There was an illegal
Things
addition.
happen. Yeah, especially with older homes that have been modernized, etc. Always ask to see the plans.
Okay, it's good advice, as you say, Wendy, because you might find you take one look at them and say, well, hang on a second, structure which is on my property doesn't appear on these plans. You know, immediately there's a problem, and it's going to become your problem when you take ownership.
Because then maybe when you want to sell those buyers, we'll ask for them
the plans.
And then you get a surprise yourself once you source them, if you can, from the municipality.
Richard, interesting comment from Richard. He says, I'm always puzzled why insurers will look for any reason not to pay and seek loopholes for everything. Surely a reputable insurance company would include ongoing checks specifically as a value-added service. They're very happy to accept monthly payment for my policy, as Richard's comment.
They don't maintain hordes of inspectors going out. No, they're definitely not going to do that. That's why you'll hear in their adverts saying we pay 100% of all valid claims. The valid in there says everything. Yes.
Yeah. We have to leave it there. Wendy, thanks for raising a very, very interesting case. And please do let us know if you make any headway fighting in Palesa's corner, and perhaps Mark's to join the fight as well.
Yes, I will have an answer certainly from the insurer by next week. So we'll share that and whatever else I can on the issue.
Okay, thanks so much. In the meantime, if you want to raise a case with Wendy, do send an email to consumer@knowler.co.za, spelled KNOWLER.